Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham, and I'm joined today. We're recording on Tuesday. We're going to start making a habit of this. We'll talk wrestling with our new wrestling columnist, Ray Petree. Ray has joined on, written a wrestling column the past couple of weeks for AFP, and we're focusing on AEW wrestling, All Elite Wrestling. I've focused AFP's coverage of the pro wrestling business the last few years on AEW. And so Ray is taking the mantle and running with it there. Hey Ray, thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
As we introduce you, this being the introductory podcast for Ray joining here, tell our listeners and viewers on YouTube a little bit about yourself, just so we can get acclimated to your world.
Sure. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. My great uncle was a professional wrestler in the 80s. Worked at the Richmond Coliseum, did a little work as a jobber, as they would
Okay.
say in industry, for Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. Got beaten up by guys like Wahoo McDaniels and Jay Youngblood. Some names I'm sure you're familiar with as a fan, a longtime fan. And I've had wrestling's been in my life my entire life. It's something I've always enjoyed, medium of storytelling I love, and I've been an AEW fan since the beginning. I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
AEW for me kind of reminds me of the 80s wrestling, at least when AEW is at its best. So the 80s Mid-Atlantic wrestling that I grew up on. I'm sure like just like in anything else you were, back in my day, you were either a fan of the Mid-Atlantic NWA or you were a fan of WWF at that time. And it's kind of now similar. There are some people I'm sure who are AEW and WWE, but a lot of folks are one or the other. And I don't like to get into the tribalism so much.
yes,
I'm happy that there's two companies, two big companies like that, plus Impact, plus or Impact TNA, plus NWA, plus MLW, New Japan, and I'm glad
yeah,
there's all these different companies out there. But the two big ones, because it means more wrestlers and more wrestling. But yeah, it's hard to get in our world. You can only keep up with so much. I think that's the you gotta pick and choose, right? So.
yes,
Well, okay, so generally, okay, state of AEW. We're both fans. We're also both writers.
yes,
We analyze things. That's a broad way to start.
yes.
How do you think things are standing with AEW right now?
The ratings, the weekly attendance at these shows would say that they're in a slump. I think. I don't think that's an audacious claim to make. As we preface, we're both big fans of AEW, but it's important to criticize them where criticism is needed. And I think we could say maybe it's a start when MJF left, maybe it's when he started this feud with the imaginary devil. But at some point in time, be it because of injury, bad booking, maybe a mixture of the two, they've been in a slump. And I think things are starting to, as they hit some of these bigger pay-per-views like Forbidden Door and All In, things are starting to pick back up. I wrote last week's column that with I think Tony Khan's finally found three young wrestlers he can base his storylines around for the next few months. And it's exciting to see as someone who watches these shows every week and sometimes feels a little fatigued by it.
It can. That can be fatiguing. And there's 2 hours on Wednesday. There's an hour on Friday nights, most Friday nights. There's 2 hours on Saturdays and
Yeah.
pay-per-views. I mean, I love it. The pay-per-view, here's what I would say about AEW. I want to get your thought. The pay-per-views are fabulous. I mean, the matches are all great. They're laid out well. I didn't like the Anarchy in the Arena match at the end of the last pay-per-view show, but the whole pay-per-view up to that point. I mean, there's great in-ring action, there's logical storytelling, a nice mixture of matches too. There are some technical matches, there are, some high spot matches, furniture matches, and there's a good mix of the different kinds of wrestling. But the weekly shows, I don't know, but the stuff between the pay-per-views
Yeah.
is what is there's lack of cohesion maybe. The storytelling isn't so good, but if you can overcome that,
Yes.
there are even good matches on those shows, and then the pay-per-views are just fabulous. So but the hard part for Tony Khan is the two ways for him to make money are pay-per-views, and then the weekly TV is a separate way to make money, and the ratings for the weekly TV are struggling.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I think the pay-per-views are always one, they're long, so you get a lot of bang for your buck. And all the matches are fabulous because these are some of the best in-ring workers in the world. I mean, it really, Tony Khan's christened this "Where the best come to wrestle." And I think that's true. At least a lot of the best. But there is something lacking there in that weekly television, the way we move pay-per-view to pay-per-view, the way we navigate these feuds. Um, I don't know if that's maybe they need someone like a writer, not necessarily a television writer, but someone who is well versed in writing wrestling shows. I don't know what that might be, but the pay-per-views are definitely a different level than the shows are.
Yeah, yeah. You gave your background in wrestling, and I love this because you didn't even say that when we were chatting, either by email or right before the first start of this first podcast about your great uncle. But I love that story. I have a small background in wrestling too, that I don't think I've told you necessarily, and it might be repeating for some of the listeners and viewers from when I do other podcasts over the years. But just the quick recap, I was fortunate back in 2010 and 2011. I got hired by a company called AWE, as it turns out, not AEW, AWE, Awesome Wrestling Entertainment was the name. A guy from California was trying to get a TV wrestling company up, and had hired a local promoter in Virginia for some reason. I don't know how they all connect, how things connect, to work with him. And then they needed a website. At the time, I was doing website design on the side to make extra money because the journalism business wasn't paying very good at the time. And I went from designing the website to working with the company on creative. Got to be we put together a pay-per-view. Actually, we did a pay-per-view on in-demand pay-per-view. That was supposed to be our launch into the TV series, which never materialized, unfortunately. But um, one time I've written formats and backstories for wrestlers, for our announcers. Our announcers were Dutch Mantel, Larry Zbyszko, Chris Cruz from back in late WCW days. We had on the card, it was like Kevin Nash and Diamond Dallas Page, Rock and Roll Express, Axel Duggan, Fit Finley from WWE. Gosh, there were Terry Funk and Tommy. How could I forget Terry Funk? Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer wrestled a match. So that was a lot of fun. Um, so I say all that to say, you know, there are a lot of people who criticize Tony Khan. Hey, you're new to the business. You don't have a background in the business, etc. I didn't either, and yeah, I think it probably does help to have some people who are working with you who kind of know what you're doing. I mean, we were a team, and we had some people who we work with closely, and it was a great process there. But no, man, I could totally see having that limited inside perspective from 10 years ago plus that wrestling isn't as easy as you think when you watch it on Wednesday nights. It's a tough business to put together.
Absolutely. I mean, scripted television is difficult in general, let alone you're doing something that the cast is ever changing because of injuries, because of absences, because of vacations. I mean, and not only that, but you're constantly adding roster members because this company's growing naturally. Uh, and it goes back to wrestling's a really mercurial thing. It's here and it's gone. You have moments where fans love wrestlers and then they don't, and sometimes it's inexplicable. We Dax Harwood just announced today, I believe, that he's going to be out for a while. So anything that FTR had, been scripted to do for the next 6 months is just out the window. So now he has to go back to the drawing board. It's tough,
And
very
and that
tough.
also puts Cash Wheeler in a weird place because,
Absolutely.
when you're known as a tag team, it's hard to be a single for a while. It
Yes.
might put him on the shelf with Dax. So,
Yeah.
that's yeah, I had not read that, but that you're right. And also, in the wrestling business, everybody, okay, I'm going to use the employment term independent contractor, but not, I don't mean it just for that. They're all looking out for their own best interest. So you've got to work. It's a constant shifting ballet of,
Yes.
all right, hey, we need you to be in this angle with this group or this guy or whatever, and we need you to put them over. Okay, that might be what you thought, and it might be the, hey, that's best for the company, but then you got to convince these guys and gals to do this, and sometimes they don't want to do it.
Yeah,
A lot of times they don't want to do it. I found out when I
right.
was working in the business. So, I mean, yeah, it's not as easy as, and even when you have contracts, I mean, they still it's tough. So getting back to MJF, I'm glad we started there. I thought so. You mentioned the feud with the fake devil. I just thought that the face turn was the weird thing with
Yes,
him because he's the best heel in the business. I mean, well, him and certainly Roman Reigns and his 1 and 1A, whichever
yes,
day it might be, but
yes,
best heel certainly in AEW, and then you turn him face and you made him into a comic book character for and not even a very funny,
yeah,
silly character. I'm glad he came back out. He's still getting cheers, but he seems like he's trying to get that edge back.
sure. Ric Flair was cheered in WCW in the late '90s, and then he did something dastardly, and he was booed. It's fine. It's fine to be cheered when you come out, and then be booed when you're, being a villain. So, uh, I, yeah, he did. It wasn't a good look as him being a baby face, not because he couldn't get the adoration he needed, but because material was oftentimes a little goofy, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it was pretty
It was
goofy.
pretty
I agree.
silly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And especially for a guy who, I mean, I see some similarities with him as a character. I hate to even say character, but as a, his image, there's some similarities with Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was a guy that
Yeah.
should have been a heel. When he turned heel, that was a mistake, but he was a very edgy face.
Yes.
Um, so they could have gone that route with him because it's hard. It's going to be hard at this point. People love MJF and they love to hate him, and
Yes.
So anyway, he's going to be feuding at first here with Roosh. Now I I love Roosh's work in the ring.
Yes.
And we know that they're going to put MJF over. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but
Of course.
this is an interesting way to get MJF back in front of folks.
Yeah, Roosh. I mean, obviously at Forbidden Door, it's a joint pay-per-view. You'd assume that people who watch New Japan and CMLL are going to be watching this pay-per-view. Um, I know AEW is fairly big in Mexico because of its how much it leans on luchadors and lucha libre, which I personally love myself. I love that style of wrestling, and I love, like you said, I love Roosh's in-ring work. I think I also think for Roosh, this is a chance for him to regain some prominence that he's lost. He came in with a lot of steam with Andrade, and slowly it's fizzled out. MJF is a guy who bats nearly 100. He's got the Midas touch. He can make anybody look more exceptional than they are somehow. And I think mutually it could benefit them both.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely looking for. That's gonna be a banger of a match
It's going to
at
be
the pay per
incredible.
view. Yeah, yeah. The other big storyline, for obvious reasons, and it's kind of holding right now, the Young Bucks as the EVPs.
Yes.
You know what they're doing there. They're trying to be the authority, the whatever storyline from time immemorial in pro wrestling.
Yes.
The evil bosses of the company. I actually, I had lost interest in the Bucks there for quite a while. After being a big fan of theirs for years, the last couple of years, until the change in their character. Um, they've swallowed in Jack Perry. They're making a. I mean, he made himself a heel with the whole thing with CM Punk, and they're trying to use that, and I think they're using that well. Um, and so now they've turned their attention from the match against Team AEW. Now they're picking on the Acclaimed. I love this for the Acclaimed. The Acclaimed also has been kind of floating around the last little bit. They had all that steam a year or two ago. They got a run with the tag belts. They had the run with the six-man belts, trios belts, um, and kind of been rudderless for a bit. So hey, put them in there with the Bucks. That means AEW is taking the Acclaim seriously again.
Yes. Uh, we can talk about the Anarchy in the Arena match if you'd like a little,
Sure. Oh
minute,
yeah, yeah.
because we both have a lot of thoughts about it. I think I mean, there's no question that the Young Bucks are a great in-ring tag team. I mean, in the ring, they're as good as anyone in the world. I think, like you said, they kind of floated around in ether for a little while after, yes, after they lost the tag belts the first time. They got them back, and they've kind of been, they had a little feud with FTR back and forth, and they really haven't done much. And I think maybe that's because they received so much backlash. I don't think that's unfair to say for how prominent they were.
Yeah.
And now they've returned, sort of borrowing that the insider baseball hatred that they have because of the CM Punk drama. I like the character. I think in terms of the psychology of just the sense that the booking makes is that, yeah, they're the executive vice presidents, but Tony Khan was at the pay-per-view without a neck brace. He then gave it to Rich Eisen on the Rich Eisen show. Does it make sense that they're the vice presidents and Tony Khan's there? Not really.
Right.
And I think that's probably why they backed off a little bit from it on the shows. They've been transitioning to this Acclaim feud, which I hope they lean into fully. And like you said about the Acclaim, they're one, Max Caster is talk about a hot mic. I mean, you give him, you don't know what he's going to say. It's intriguing. It definitely garners attention. And in the ring, I think they don't get the respect that they deserve. Both of those guys, Anthony Bones and Max Caster, are phenomenal wrestlers. Very classically trained guys who don't overwork. They have a lot of restraint. Everything they do looks clean, and having Billy Gunn in the corner is great. I'm excited to see that feud. Swerve Strickland sort of teased maybe that next time they do Team AEW versus the Elite, he needs to be involved. I don't know if maybe we're, going to cross over into that realm again to do Anarchy in the Arena, but I'm excited to see those two teams. Tag team wrestling is personally my favorite. Just to see two tag teams, just the 2 versus 2, no gimmicks. It's my favorite kind of match. So.
Yeah, the Bucks. You talked about the Bucks' work. There was a match. It might have been a 2021 pay-per-view they had with Penta and Ray Phoenix, a cage match.
Yes.
That was one of the best. I mean, that was one of the better matches that year. It was certainly a top 5 match of the year that year.
Yes.
And I've been a fan of the Acclaimed since, and I miss the YouTube shows. I'm one of those guys. I would watch the 2 YouTube shows each week because I love they felt like studio wrestling from the 80s. It felt like those old World Championship wrestlings at 605 on TBS, where it was there to put guys over. And that's where the Acclaimed, I mean, they started out, they were a tag team racking up wins against jobbers on a regular basis, grabbing the mic and like you said, Max Caster being very unpredictable. I usually have my wife, I'm very fortunate, she'll sit there, at least tolerate wrestling on Wednesday nights and watches it with me. And then our dog sitter, kid who lives down the street, he's probably 20 or 21 now, but we've known him since he was 12 or 13. He's an AEW fan too. He goes to the shows with us when we go. He comes over on most Wednesday nights. The only time I'm saying shush to anything during an AEW show is, okay, Max Caster's getting ready to say something. So we can't miss those 3 or 4 verses. We have to make sure we don't miss that. So that's good. That's good for Max. And then, like you say, the work in the ring. I think they've been. I've liked their work since those days on the YouTube show. So I love that they're getting this push. You mentioned Swerve. I think we gotta get some talking here about the AEW World Champ. What are your thoughts on? Okay, so I'll preface this. I'll say my thoughts on the booking and then let you talk. I'm supposed to set you up and let you be the guy, but I have not liked how they've booked the new world champion. I don't think they've been treating him like a world champion. Now he's getting ready for a match with Will Ospreay. I'm worried about Swerve because I also love Ospreay. Who can lose this match and not lose momentum? I don't know why they booked this match.
I've read your column as often as it's released, and I understand your thoughts about Swerve Strickland. I think when you exit a pay-per-view and he's not opening the show as a world champion, you're taking the attention away from the grandest prize, at least in your company. Very few people have won that AEW championship so far. I mean, what are we on champion? This is the eighth person by my rough count. I think it's very prestigious, and Christian Cage is doing great work, but I don't know if he's the attraction that they need in the main event versus their champion right now when he just came off losing the TNT title. So, and this is another thing we talked about with MJF. Swerve Strickland was for a long time positioning himself as a heel, as a true heel, and just organically got over kind of, I don't think I don't think purposefully. I don't think he intended to be over in the way that he is as a babyface. So it's odd. I don't know if has he ever worked as a babyface? Not to my knowledge. Um, I think Will Ospreay. I mean, while it's probably I'm not gonna say the biggest box office attraction, but I mean, they're two good workers, but they're both faces, and Ospreay has an air of invulnerability. Uh, I would like to see him win. Maybe Don Callis gets involved and muddies the water. I don't,
Some way to take heat off the guy who loses, right? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, kind of a non-finish.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was at that show, I can't remember if I mentioned this when we were on the recording or before the recording, but I was at the Greensboro show a
Mhm.
few months ago, Sting's retirement match. The two most over guys, other than Sting that night, obviously Sting, but clearly, gosh, it was Osprey and Swerve, and I'm not sure if it was, if who was more over between those two, and that was Osprey's sort of debut. I mean, we knew for a while he was coming.
Yes.
Um, but I'll tell the when I went with a buddy who was a fan of like me from the 80s of old Mid-Atlantic wrestling. So we buy the tickets, it's in Greensboro, Sting's retiring. I'm thinking when I buy the tickets, this is going to be like an old NWA Mid-Atlantic crowd, right? It's Sting's retirement match. There's going to be a lot of people who are Ric Flair fans, wooing their heads off for 5 hours.
Right.
And I was disabused of that notion when Will Ospreay wrestled like the second or third match and his music plays. And at that point where the fans are supposed to say, Ospreay, Ospreay, 16,000 people are saying Ospreay, Ospreay. And I'm like, whoa, this is a totally AEW crowd and he is over.
Yeah.
So between that and then all night long, whose house, Swerve's house. That's all. I dreamed that for days after that because I heard it so many times that night. Those guys over like crazy. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I mean, it's, I like that. Yeah. And in the one sense, I like that they're putting them together. In the other sense, oh man, because the title is prestigious and it
Yes.
shouldn't change hands. So, like, yeah, I even had a problem with Samoa Joe only being a 3 month champion, 3 or 4 month champion, whatever it was. I think you need to, I don't want it to go the length of Roman Reigns being champion for almost four
Yes. Yeah.
years, but you gotta have a little bit more longevity with that. So, all that said, it'll be a heck of a match.
It'll be great. It'll be fantastic.
Looking forward to that, no question. So, hey, so tomorrow night is Dynamite. Any idea what are we looking for? I, I'm sure they told us on Friday and Saturday what matches to look for Wednesday. But I'm at a loss right now.
So I know Will Ospreay is going to be defending his international championship against Ray Phoenix. I assume it's going to be the main event. Maybe it'll open the show. Tony Khan's sort of unpredictable. Um, that match will be fantastic. I think it will exceed my wildest expectations. Um, Roosh will be wrestling in a tune-up match, I guess. Jack Perry versus Dustin Rhodes in the TNT qualifier for that ladder match.
I saw Dustin's promo on Collision, I think it was,
Yes.
calling out Jack Perry. So yeah, they're setting that up. Good, good.
A trios match. It looks like the Roderick Strong, Kyle Fletcher, and Takeshita versus Mark Briscoe, Kyle O'Reilly, and Orange Cassidy. That's I'm sure that's crossing over several feuds, maybe.
Yeah, that's quite makeshift there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's matchmaking at its finest. And then we have Mercedes Moné versus Zeuxis, I believe is how you pronounce that. for the TBS championship. Uh, she is the tag team partner of Stephanie Vaquer,
Okay.
CMLL. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, I admittedly I don't watch a lot of women's lucha libre wrestling, but I'm sure that will be a good match because
That's
Mercedes
quite.
Moné.
That would be quite niche.
Yes, yeah, that's yeah. I mean, it's below
If we
Joshi. Yeah,
if we find a CML Lucha Libre women's expert, then we've really worked hard to get there, right?
yeah. You're changing the VPN for sure on your browser. Jack Perry, Dustin Rhodes. I love Dustin. I just know he's not going to win, and I'm going to be
Right.
disappointed. Yeah,
Yeah, there's too. That's the other thing about the TV shows. There's too many matches where you kind of know already who's going to win just based on the
yes,
matchups.
yeah. I
You
guess the
know.
saving grace is these are usually really good matches. It's not like I don't I don't mean to go like bipartisan but WWE, some of these matches are very they're limited in what they can do because of their schedule. In AEW, it's to the walls. I mean,
Yeah.
they just set up a match differently, and I think that's a lot of the appeal of it.
Yeah. Oh, the match quality is the appeal.
Yes,
No,
yes,
on the TV shows, even if you criticize every match might not be your cup of tea, but you
yes,
can't say that they don't put on good 20-minute matches throughout their show.
absolutely.
Whereas WWE is, I mean, not knocking them. It works. Their ratings tell you, and their
Yes,
ticket sales tell you it works. But if you watch a 3-hour Raw or a 2-hour SmackDown, you might get a good 20, 30 minutes of wrestling and a lot of talk. But their fans seem to like that. So,
yeah.
um, all right. Well, we'll look forward to the column on Thursday. That's and I should have started off the podcast saying that, but the Ray's column runs on Thursday evenings on the website. Of course, it's thereafter with the review of Dynamite, looking ahead to Rampage, looking ahead to Collision, the weeks of the pay-per-views. We'll look ahead to the pay-per-views as well. And we'll be getting together on a lot of Tuesdays to kind of get ready for all that. So,
Okay.
well, Ray, it's been great talking with you today and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Chris.